Hey everybody, it's Commander Cloud. Welcome back to another tier list update, specifically the Solo Lane tier list. Tier list that rates available solo laners based on their effectiveness and how they fit in the role. Please note, as it says up here, gods that are not consistently played in the role are not going to be placed on the tier list. That'd be example. Let's say just pick two gods at random, Athena and Merlin. They're always played in support and mid. You never hardly see them in solo, so they're not going to be on here. And if you want a full conquest tier list, I'm sure you can find that. This is just going to rate solo lane specifically. Alright, it's been a while since we've done one of these. Specifically, I have not done one since 8.8 because that's what the last one said. This is a completely new one because it's easier just to make a new one since it's been that long, because we can go through everything a little better. So we're just going to go one at a time through, the viable options. And we are going to start with Odin up here, obviously. And he's probably, I would say he's pretty, I think he's above average as character, but not played as often as he was. He has been nerfed quite a few times recently, so he's dropped off quite a bit down here. Obviously still has the strong clear he always has had, but of course his weakness being once his clear is used, he has nothing else that he can really do. Odin ult's always going to be a good ultimate. But, the main thing is, compared to other gods in the role, he's just not going to be as good as a lot of other picks are. So, he's going to sit down there, skip a bunch of these, because our next viable option would be Hades. I think he's definitely got more usability than Odin does, because it is possible for him to clear by just using one ability, which makes him a little bit safer. As long as you can auto the minions properly to get your blight damage, be fine. Obviously, he gets good pressure in lane because his clear is very strong. Got lifesteal to deal with. You've got his ultimate to deal with, which gives him protections and all that fun stuff. And of course, late game, he's going to be more of a I go in, I ult people. He's a beads forcer, mainly late. So you're probably not going to see him like soloing anybody. But obviously, he's going to give you pressure. He's going to give you really easy clear. Pretty unlikely you ever lose a buff or anything because of that. And then his late game transition to a crowd control bot, which is great for your team fights. Individually, he won't do much, but he's a solid pick there. Obviously, next we have Bastet, who I would say, just because of pick frequency and overall success right now, she's pretty good. Obviously, you go the Soul Eater build on her, and you can go pretty much all damage if you want. You can get some defense, but she's going to be pretty much all damage. But again, she's good at getting pressure. She's good at, poking targets. She can be very annoying in that she can solo somebody, especially if she gets a clean ult off. It's really great. And she's able to exert some pressure on buffs because, she's got her jump. So she can go to your buff and try to take it. And if she doesn't, she can just jump away. Pretty safe. So it gives you a little bit different way than Hades to get pressure by trying to invade jungle rather than, getting minion pressure, because it's going to be a bit before she's clearing particularly well in the game. So that would be her one weakness, is early laning phase. The rest of it is good because she can get good jungle pressure. She has the ability to solo carry late game if that comes up. So That's very handy. She can be in and out really easily for damage. So she's going to go here. S plus is going to be the highest. I don't know if we're really going to be like using D tier. We probably are only going to go so far down as B because that's kind of ridiculous to be all the way down here with anything. Anyway, moving on. Hell, last season we could have been talking about this, but she's fallen out so much that that's not really a viable option. Let's look at Vamana now. I don't know if he's quite back to his old ways. Obviously, the 9.5 update was very good for him because it just makes his passive and his ult better. Because, you know, it's more health, and of course he gets power from his physical protections. And he also gets bonus prots and damage during his ult. Very important. Vamana has good wave pressure. That about level 6, his clear is pretty good with Umbrella Ring. And all that. His 2 will give you very quick poke. That is pretty difficult to avoid. He can try to pressure your buffs and things with his ultimate. It's very useful. His one weakness is that there are certain gods he does not do particularly well fighting early. I would say gods like Osiris give him a lot of trouble in that regard. So there's some warriors that are still better than him in that, but what he does is, you know, you hang out in the lane, you get your items done, and then he becomes a very big late game annoyance for enemy carries to deal with, especially if you're a mage. Very difficult to get away from. So that's what he brings to the table. So he's in about the same spot Hades would be there. Anyway, continuing on, Bakasura we have... You might see in a few games. I know I have seen him in some games. I would put him down here though, because while he's a good DPS character and all that, good sustain with his 2, makes it very easy for him to get buff secures and invade your buffs and limit your farm. His damage tends to, when he's in solo, tends to be very non-threatening. Because, you know, he's hitting mostly a tanky god most of the time, which is going to be a much less consequential damage than it would be if he was ganking people out of the jungle. So I think he's about where Odin would be, in that there are certain things he does quite well that can make him useful in the lane, but overall he's not going to necessarily be beating you if you play that properly and you pick a proper god against him. Anyway, Guanyu, of course, is pretty solid. He's a very difficult god to kill because he has built-in sustain. He has a dash. His ult is very good for escaping. It's very good for chasing. He gets good wave pressure because of Cthulhu Assault, and if you don't pick a god that can interrupt that, it's going to be a lot harder for you to deal with him. And then late game, he becomes even better, which is part of why I like Guanyu a lot. His late game, he's very annoying because he has healing, and his ult is just, he runs at people, he gets your beads, he gets all your relics, does all that fun stuff, and then your carries come in and finish it off. And then of course you got the heal, so you can keep pressuring objectives doing that thing. So his transition from early to late game is very nice, very smooth. It's a lot better than a lot of other gods would have. So there he is right there. He can be a little mana hungry, so you do have to keep that in mind. You probably need to get breastplate on him in most games, just because you need the mana sustain to keep healing. Alright, and then moving on, non-viability up here, really we're going to throw Loki in here. I would put him right here with these guys. Of course, Loki tends to get good wave pressure. It's a little bit harder for him now because his 2 is going to be a lot less effective for clearing waves, but I wouldn't say that's that big of a deal for him. He can still find good pressure. He can go after your buffs pretty effectively. It's not hard for him, especially if you're using the ult mostly as an escape tool early. So you can look for pressure in the jungle. Because if you're Loki in solo, it's unlikely you're going to be just killing somebody by ulting them. Because you're usually, again, going to be against a tanky god. Doesn't do you a lot of good to ult unless there's a gank incoming, so you can lock somebody down. But in terms of individual damage, you're not doing a whole lot by yourself as Loki in the lane. Of course, late game, he's a big threat because he can be a second jungler and look for picks on enemy carries and things like that. He can be good late game burst in DPS. Of course, he's not a good frontliner just because of how he's built to work like that. You can build him fairly tanky in solo, though, because I think he does use Gladshield pretty well. You know, but you still need a good mix of damage in there. You still need a Transcendence. Still need those things. And obviously, he's not going to be the most effective solo laner, but he can, you know... It's usually pretty likely he gets unlikely he gets smoked in the lane unless he just plays really unsafe. And then his transition to late game is good, even though his early is not going to be that effective. All right, moving on. I can't really say Fenrir is going to get placed here because he's just not played enough. Same with these hunters up here. While hunters are coming into solo lane a little bit, these 3 up here do not do that. Artemis and Cupid you don't really want over there. And on her, we're not seeing that played. But that's the main thing. None of these guys have been played in solo at all, so we're not going to talk about it. Fenrir's get seen a little bit in some ranked games, but that's infrequently. He's mostly being picked in jungle and support, so we don't talk about that. What we do talk about is Hercules, who has been a little bit more favored in 9.5 just because of his passive mostly. And that's always why Herc has been so good, is his passive is silly. As you get more power as you take damage, you know. For a maximum of 3 stacks, I think, right? I don't remember how much overall power he gets at max rank. But he does get extra power. Oh no, I think his passive is just 5 plus 1 per level, right? I think, I'm not sure. Of course, his 3 is very strong. His clear is pretty good. If you grab the minions and driving strike them, and you have Bluestone, obviously, that's big clear. He's very good at that. He's also very good at pressuring his opponent in lane because he can do a lot of extra damage. If you hit one driving strike on somebody, auto them a few times, it really hurts. And because of his 3, he's not punished very much for the minion. For the clear, he might lose by trying to fight his opponent. But obviously, solid pick, warrior that relies on his abilities. Those types of warriors got a little bit of a boost in this patch just for the fact of the minions having more procs affects their clear less. And of course, late game bully, you get like a shield of regrowth. You press your 3, you run at people, and you driving strike them and do all those things. You're just there to be really annoying late game. And of course, against the right gods in lane, he gets a lot of pressure and he can be a boxing threat. So it makes it hard to step up in the lane, which gives him a lot of space to get to that late game point of being a strong bully. So there he is. Who is... Okay, we are going to talk about Poseidon a little bit because the Poseidon tech has been coming up lately. But I am going to be tentative with him and put him down here with these weird guys that do some specific things well but are not that big of a threat overall in the lane. See, Poseidon can get good wave pressure. His clear is very excellent. Of course, his buff clear because of Trident is going to be excellent as well. Great Eye of the Jungle start with him. Transitioning into that. And you can maybe get some health items and things to be a little bit tankier. You know, grab your Warlocks, things like that. Grab your Gem of ISO if you want it. That item's not that great right now, but it's there. And of course, his potential to burst somebody, and he's a ganking danger because he can roll over to the mid lane with his Kraken, blast a mid laner, they're gone, and then you can look for an objective off of that. So he's good at that. You can clear objectives pretty quickly with him, Trident damage, and then you Kraken for secure. So you got those tools. So yeah, what have we got here? We got a god that can clear really well, camps and waves. We have a gank threat, and we have good objective secure, very effective. Now, if he gets caught out or tries to take a bad fight or fight in a bad position, obviously that's going to be very poor for him because he's a mage. So inherently less tanky, has difficulty getting away, even though you do have passive for movement speed. That's not always going to save you. Like if you're against the Vamana, he's fast, he's got a dash. Like, he's pretty tough to get away from. He's very bad for Poseidon to deal with. But what Poseidon does offer you is pretty strong, so it gives him enough viability that you won't get in trouble unless you just do something really stupid. Alright, next one, which you guys saw me play recently, is Apollo. And I actually feel like this is a spot for him here. I could put him higher, yes, but there are certain situations where he has trouble, and you saw that. I mean, I got ganked by Hunbots, and King Arthur can do a lot of burst damage at a fairly safe range. So that can give you a little bit of trouble specifically, but of course Apollo's strength is any hunter, you can stand back, hit your autos to get poke and pressure that way. Your early wave clear is going to be a little awkward just because his one doesn't do enough early, really. And then your autos are obviously hitting minions for less in 9.5. So early it makes it a little bit difficult. And also with the start you have with Apollo, it is just tier 1 dev gloves as your main sustain. So that's not helping you that much until you've got that item, got Devos stacked and online. Of course, in mid game to late game, he's a very big threat because obviously you're going to build crit and things. You're building in a way that you just kill people straight up. Late game, that's all you're interested in. So even if your laning phase is difficult, it doesn't really matter because you have that. You have global ultimate threat, so you can get anywhere on the map really quickly and help out your team very fast. Helps set up gold furies, getting towers. He's a really great split pusher. So what he may not offer you in lane, he makes up for by his late game and his ability to rotate. And obviously, if played right, he can be pretty safe in the lane because he has a dash and a mez. Very important to think about. Although against certain gods, it can be kind of tough to deal with certain comps. Like highly mobile junglers can give him a lot of trouble. Just because even with all the ways you might have to get away, you can still be chased down by gods like Susano and Hunbots. But there he is. All of this here, we're not seeing it played. Do I entertain Chang'e for a second just because... Okay, we entertained Chang'e for a minute, but this god stinks. Let me be real. Okay, a good Chang'e might be okay, but this god is bad. There's nothing else to talk about. I mean, her 1 and her 3 are annoying. Her 3 is very annoying because it's healing. But if you bait out her 2, she kind of just dies. One gank, she gone. Not anything you can do. Even with an ult, most people are going to have beads. And most of the things you're going to be fighting in solo are going to have a way to deal with your ult without using their beads. And then late game, she provides nothing because most of her abilities besides her ult require her to be in the action a lot. And that's the worst place for Chang'e to be when you have no front line. Because they're just going to kill you first. And then what happens next? Nothing. All Chang'e really does is feed the enemy team, and that's my experience with watching her played. I've never seen a Chang'e do well in solo, so let that be a warning. All right, Chronos, we'll talk about it for a second. Yeah, kind of in the same space as Apollo, but without the great ability to rotate. And it takes him a lot longer to become a big threat in a game than it does for Apollo. Apollo, by your 4th item, you're very dangerous. It takes Chronos, basically his full build. And I mean, he can play very safe. His wave clear is okay. There's that, and of course his late game threat to split push. He can be annoying to lock down just because if you use your ult correctly. That's pretty tough to deal with, especially if it gets you a lot of distance out. Of course, again, because of the conditions need to be so right for Chronos, I don't really like him that much. I still put him in S- because a good Chronos that knows how to use their ult well and knows when to split push and when to do all the Chronos things, they're going to be pretty decent, but overall, really tough to justify that pick. Tier, now we're going to talk about him. S right now, obviously 9.5 gave him a boost because his clear is very good, especially if you got a Bluestone. Very good for him. He's obviously notoriously difficult to lock down because of his passive, limiting his crowd control to 1 second. And then, of course, it can get DR'd from there. So, pretty tough to deal with. Very slippery god. He can get to your carries, get to carries pretty easily. He can force beads with Fearless. And because of his 2 healing, he's going to be very tough to kill still, even if he dives your backline. And tough to deal with. Very good lane pressure again. And a well-used Fearless can basically kill somebody. I mean, the Fearless itself is not going to kill, but if you can nail someone with that, that's a lot of damage. That's going to make them very vulnerable afterward. There's that. There's obviously his buff stealing threat because he can do a lot of burst very quickly. And then he can ult away. And you'll never be able to catch him because he can just ult and blue stance and then dash afterward. The de facto probably most annoying god in the game. And he still makes you feel that. Zhang Kui, I like better than a lot of mages. He's probably 2nd best mage in solo right now. Just because his passive gives him a lot of extra tankiness. He uses tank items very well. His ult can be very annoying. If he has cooldown, he's getting it up. He can get it up quite quite often. Very difficult to deal with. His poke, he has ranged poke that's very difficult to deal with. His 3 can keep him pretty safe, especially since the ability will fire regardless of whether or not the animation is interrupted for it. It's one of the weirdest abilities in the game, and I hate how it functions, but it really works to his advantage because it makes him extremely difficult to lock down because his 3 can still just go off even if you like stun him. If you hit the button before any crowd control, that ability will still go off. So yeah. And of course, if a Shankui gets big and you do nothing about it, in a game, he will steamroll your whole team. He will steamroll the whole enemy team, pretty much. Alright, so Sun Wukong. Obviously, this is the best win lane god, or this is one of the best don't lose lane gods in the game. Because obviously his one is great clear because it does bonus damage to minions. You know, his different forms of his dash make him very safe. His ult is very safe. He's very hard to lock down. He uses Soul Eater particularly well, which everyone likes to build. You do not kill this god in lane, therefore he never loses the lane. And then that just allows him to transition to late game and be a bully like he likes to be. Dive your backline, stun you, hit the one, hit the two, goes up in the ult if he gets in trouble or keeps chasing with it. You know, obviously chase with the 3 if you use bird form, very good. And getting out of danger with the ox because it is obviously slow immune, knockback immune, and those things. So you can just, even if you're in a group of enemies, pop that thing and you'll be pretty relatively safe. One of the safest gods in the game, doesn't lose the lane. Not really anything else you can say about that. A god that can't lose the lane is a pretty good one most of the time. Muzen Cobb is going in S tier because this is one of the, he's probably the most effective hunter in solo lane right now, and he was already being used in that by a few people already. And of course, this meta just opened it up for him because his lane pressure is ridiculous, especially with Bluestone. You have Bluestone and bees and the honey and all that stuff. Clears minion waves very easily, very safely. Hives are great because that's built in sustain, that's built in movement speed and attack speed. Very good to have. That also helps your itemization so you can get more power early without having to rely so much on attack speed items. He uses Soul Eater incredibly well. That is an important thing with gods in solo lane these days. Despite him having a relative lack of safety, he's pretty difficult to actually kill just because of his movement speed. Can make it easy for him to juke things out. But most of the way he stays out of trouble is just having raw wave pressure that no other god is going to have. So, and his job is to just never put himself in a bad position, clear waves, farm really hard, and then get to late game with your items, and then you one-shot everybody with Stinger. Pretty simple. But obviously pressure is big value right now. Alright. Chalk, we're going to talk about my sad little man. I do love him, but he has to go down here. Actually, you know what? I hate Chang'e. Let's move her down more. Okay. Anyway. Chalk, another typically doesn't lose lane god, although he has to play a little bit less safe, even though he's got really good built-in sustain, which it may not be the case now because I think they changed the numbers. Obviously, his 3 was the single highest sustain ability in the game. Unconditionally. At one point it was Hercules, but that required you to take a lot of damage after you popped your 3. So, man, but Chalk had the best healing ability in the game, which is great. And he gets good wave pressure. It's always great. No problem with clearing camps. All that stuff is great, but when his 3 is down, he feels kind of vulnerable. And a lot of times, you can get him to just burn his ult because he has very little recourse outside of his 3 if there's a guy that can box him well on top of him. And of course, gods that poke really well are pretty annoying for Chalk to deal with because he has to keep using his 3 to heal. And that can cost mana. And it's also just a really important ability for him. His late game's often less effective than gods like Sun Wukong because, you know, it is possible to miss your 1, which sets up for a lot of things for you if you put that in the right place. If you don't hit it or miss a lot of his damage, there's not a lot he can do except just ult because he's got nothing else to do. But if you catch him in a bad position and force that, there's not a whole lot he can do. So his late game value is very diminished. And that's the main reason why he's down here in A+. All right. Let's see here. Skipping all these. Uller we will talk about. We got a... yeah. It's a similar vein to Amuzen here. His abilities offer him great clear. He has threatening single target damage if he can hit an axe. Very good. His buff clear, not much of a problem for him. Very easy to maintain wave pressure. He's got more safety than Muzen because he has a jump and a stun with his axe, assuming you can hit it. And of course, can use Soul Eater well. I don't know if you see it as often on him. Transitions very well into being a late game threat, like the Amuzen as we see. Very high damage potential late once his items are online. Very effective hunter in solo. And then we get to the man. I'm putting Osiris straight into S+ because, bar none right now, he is the best hunter. He is the best warrior in the game. Period. He still gets usability in jungle, of course. Flex pick threat there. He's very difficult to kill in lane because of his passive giving him mitigation. Because how his kit is designed and his DPS on his autos, he is always going to have a kill threat against his lane opponent. Especially early. If you do it right, you can actually run somebody down at level 1 and kill them. There's not a lot of gods in the game that can do that. And he can, and because of itemization, giving him lots of health and mitigations, you know, you get things like Witchblade and Spirit Robe, which work really well. Oni's is great on him. Of course, you get things like Spectral if you need to, which in the Hunter meta, very good. He's already got mitigation, so he's going to be avoiding a lot of damage already, so that's an even better value for him. And then late game, you get Bumba's Hammer, and you just keep running at people. They can't stop you because you've got too much mitigation and health. You do a lot of damage inherently just because it's Osiris. This god is nearly unstoppable if he's played well. So there he goes in the top slot. Cabrakan, we see a little bit. And he can get good early pressure because of Tremors. It can help him clear very well. Of course, his clear is, because it's 9.5, not nearly as good. He is a god that can struggle sometimes to be a damage threat. Just because of the fact that he tends to need a lot of items, or tends to need certain damage items to be able to do that. If he doesn't have the right build, it can seriously hamper his ability to fight late game. Of course, late game is his biggest trouble because he literally has to press 1 and run at you to be a threat. And if people are paying attention, if support's got their crowd control right, he's going to have a lot of trouble late game because he will be stunned. He will not be able to get to a carry. And the best he can often do is get a utility wall out just to block people off or block people in for your team to do the rest. And of course, again, I gotta stress the minion buffs, making it much more difficult for him in lane because he's a guardian. Okay, so who are we talking about? We talking about Wukong. I think he's too infrequently played. Honestly, there are some people that run him pretty well, but nah. And then we have Bellona, who I do put into S. You might think I think about her the same way as Osiris, but I do not, even though her passive is very annoying and pretty good. But she doesn't quite have that same I run at you and I kill you type of thing that Osiris does. Mostly because her main CC is on an ultimate, which is not always the most effective thing to have. And then you have the fact that she's, I don't know, she's just a weird god kind of, because some of her damage isn't that threatening. The only way she's really threatening is if she's got Frostbound and she's on a carry. Otherwise, you kind of just walk away from her because her ability to chase you is dependent on her ultimate. And if she burns that, she can put herself out of position, chasing a carry, and then sort of dies. Because her ult is also her only way to get out. And if that's gone, you know, kind of have to say goodbye. And yeah, outside of her 2 and her ability to box someone if she does catch them out, that's really what her strengths are. But her 3, even though it's a disarm, not threatening damage. 1 is not threatening damage. The ult is not threatening damage. So she can do similarly to Osiris. And of course, if you go Death Toll on her, very difficult. You're probably not beating her in lane, but her late game has a little bit less to offer than Osiris. So I don't feel she's quite as good. All right. Who in here is played often enough? Nope, nope, nope. Yes. All right. Amma, of course, we got to talk about. I still like her slightly better, I think, than Bellona. Maybe. I don't know. They're about the same, I guess, if we're really honest about it. Obviously, Amma's clear is very good, because her 2 does quite a bit of damage. But outside of that, not threatening damage. Her ult is very great CC and can hit multiple targets. So that's pretty good to talk about. She's pretty unlikely to lose the lane early, just because she can keep healing. Her 2, again, is going to do a lot of damage, so she can often outpace a lot of gods with clear. Her 3, dash, silence. That's very annoying to deal with. There are certain items, though, like Gladshield, she doesn't use that well. Just because, well, for one of her abilities does no damage. And then her 3, I think, is a pretty long cooldown. Her 2, you usually want to charge it up. You don't want to spam it, really. So, and of course, like Bellona, she can get Frostbound and be annoying that way. But again, not quite as many tools as Osiris has in the bag. So we can't value her quite as much. Jing Wei, do we put her on here? I don't know. That's pretty tough to say. Because I feel like you're mostly seeing her in carry. Like most comps you're seeing with the hunter in solo, she is not the hunter in solo, she is in the duo lane. Almost every time. So we probably can't talk about that. Susano, we can't talk about that because really only Haddix plays that in solo. So there's not a whole lot to say there. I can't place a god just because one player likes to use it in ranked. Erlang, I think I've seen generally a little bit more. But he's kind of down here. Losing the knockup on his turtle kind of made him a lot less effective as a solo laner if you were going to play that. Obviously, most people aren't. I still think he has he has good viability though in solo. He actually has the ability to run somebody down and kill him at level 1 like Osiris does, which is kind of weird, but if you use your pin, or if you use, your 3 well, you can actually chase somebody down with it. His wave clear is pretty bad usually, just because pin is not a particularly high damage ability. And so you're relying on your autos a lot to try to clear, which is usually a pretty ineffective thing, especially if you're against like King Arthur. He's going to have cleared the wave well before you have, and then you're in a lot of trouble. Especially since he has abilities that can interrupt your dash. Very poor. And then late game he can be a big threat because he can just run up to somebody and kill him. But again, not all his abilities do damage. If you have a way to counter his healing, it's going to be really hard for him to do what he wants to do late game. So he's often not as effective as a lot of other gods because his clear is not as good. He's not as big of a threat in the mid game once you have itemization. Late game, he has pretty simple counters that make it pretty tough for him to be that effective. Go down the line to Nike here. Now Nike I do value quite a bit right now, as if you go mitigation build, which is you get Sigil, and then you upgrade it to the one with the mitigation passive, Spirit Robe, Oni. And then I experimented with this thing of just getting Transcendence and Heartseeker as damage. And then you just go full prots after that. Gives her a lot of prots. Her shield obviously is massive now because she's got more health because of 9.5. Her wave clear is still completely ridiculous. You will probably pretty much full clear the wave at level 6. Rank 3 on her 1 is enough to almost full clear wave. After that, you just auto, because by then the cleaves will probably wipe out the minions after that pretty easily with just a couple of cleave autos. So wave pressure is very good. She's not always going to be able to solo somebody, especially if you don't hit her full 1, because her other abilities aren't going to offer you that much damage. It's more annoying than anything at that point. And then, of course, her late game can be very effective. She, jumps at you. Her 2 is good just because it can block autos, which is great right now considering how often people want to play hunters. Her ult is just this big giant circle, it's a slow giant shield. You can't fight me. What do? Obviously, 1, again, anti-hunter. If you hit all 3 of them, it's a disarm at the end. So she offers things that work really well in this particular meta. And I think she is quite undervalued currently. So there is that. Anyway, Chronos, meh. I've seen him played ranked a couple times, but that's really people just trying stuff out, not really a serious thing. We ignore that. Kakalin, I think is, a little bit of a resurgence, but I don't think he's better than Vamana right now. Of course, he can use Gladshield and things. There's items that he can build right now that are effective for him. But he hasn't been quite that good lately, and he's still not quite at that level. And granted, if you get Bluestone, his clear is alright. His 1 and his 2 together is pretty decent damage. I think there are gods that offer better damage for clearing. His passive obviously has been nerfed heavily over the course of his existence. And there's certain gods that can fight him pretty well, like Tyr, because he's got to walk up to the wave. Tyr is a pretty annoying god for him because Tyr just presses 1 and Cuchulainn does nothing except gets knocked up. And even when his passive is active, Tyr will do the same thing. He'll knock him away and then just leave, and then you get no effectiveness out of it. So, most gods can avoid Cuchulainn during his passive. His clear is not quite as good as some other ones. Late game, it's you just try to get your stuff up, beeline at a carry, ult, get your passive up, start hitting with that stuff. Passive, and you hope that they're dead or your team comes and kills them for you at that point, because once he's burned passive and his kid in it, he is useless and will probably just be a big target that dies. So, of course, against certain gods that don't have much recourse against his passive, obviously he can fight during that and be very annoying, do a lot of damage that way. But outside of his typical early game pressure that he can get, he's not that useful. Ardio, I don't know what to do with her. We've basically not seen her, I don't think, since 9.5. I will still put her on here. We basically haven't seen her because some of her damage got nerfed and then the minions got buffed, so everyone was like, well, I don't want to play this god now, I guess. Still offers the same thing, still can offer good early pressure, great sustain. She can run at a target, do a lot of damage. Very effective that way. Not going to be invading a lot, though. But obviously Guardian problems of tougher minions make life difficult for them. Of course, she could be annoying against a carry late game because she's got a lot of damage available, a lot of sustain. Can stop escapes with her cripple. All of that good stuff, but really, she's just disappeared. So I can't really give her a big recommendation there. Cerberus is about the same. Of course, the damage potential from his 2 and 1 is very high. He still suffers the same problems. Clear is going to be a lot more difficult for him. Late game, he's kind of just an ult bot to try to set up. And if he's not able to be effective with that, he will kind of just die late game because he's a big target that does have ability he can jump over walls with, but if he gets CC'd properly, not near a wall, very dead. Going to be in a similar position to Cabrakan. All right. Let's keep going. Achilles has gotten put him here. He's gotten a buff because Gladshield is a little better now. Blackthorn's going to be better now. He likes those items a lot. Especially if he goes into his defensive stance late. Makes that little bit of power from those items more effective. He's also got more health, so that helps him on the Gladshield side of things. Of course, he can get good pressure, mostly against a single target because it's you 3 somebody a couple times, group the wave, hit the wave, hit your 1. So, I mean, there are gods that outclear him, yes, obviously. But he can get a lot of pressure in that he doesn't have to bring your health all the way down to kill you. He only has to get you into execute range. And then he becomes very annoying. He's also notoriously has a little bit of sustain, notoriously difficult to lock down because his 3 is very annoying. His ult can be used as an escape. He gets a lot of pressure on carries because he does do a lot of damage to them. One has the stun on it, and of course the threat of an execute doesn't have to get your health bar all the way down, just has to get low enough. And his passive makes it difficult to kill him late game. So he transitions well from the early to the late game. Effective all around god, Alright, Cherno Bog we are seeing a lot of. I like him better than I do Apollo, but not as much as I do AMC in the role. Because he does have a dash, but that's about all the safety he's got without ulting. And tough to deal with. His one is hard to confirm against a single target, just because the ability casts fairly slowly. So you're not gonna, you're usually not going to catch another solo laner out with that. Of course, Hunter thinks he can stand back and auto you. His passive gives him a little bit of extra damage from his autos if he can confirm the third hit to detonate crystals. And of course, the big draw with him is his ultimate is always good. It is a better Apollo ultimate because he can go to any enemy target on the map immediately. Doesn't have to burn all that mana, doesn't have to wait to get over there like Apollo does flying around in his chariot. And of course, it gives him mitigation. It provides a slow. It gives him mitigation and bonus movement speed. It will slow enemy targets. And it will do that even if he doesn't ult to them. So it really has good teamfight usability even if you don't fly to anybody. And it's also a good escape because you can go up and sit there, come back down, or you can fly to a safer place. Like you can go over to duo because there's a support there, you can bail yourself out that way, or go to your jungler, or well no, actually you have to ult to an enemy, but yeah, your best bets would be mid and duo there because or wherever your support is, so there's good safety with his ultimate if you need it. And of course, he can be anywhere in a team fight in about 3 seconds, so big value with that. And that's the main thing with Chernobog. His ult is just that good. We love it. And of course, next man up is Mr. Baron here. I really like Baron, obviously, in solo. He's one of my favorite gods, generally speaking, anyway. Talk about utility, this is what this god does, man. Of course, he's got the healing, that's big stuff. He's got a slow root thing, that's a super weird kind of CC, but it's really great. Vivid Gaze is a good ability that's low cooldown, especially once you get your Hysteria stacked. That's a lot of bonus damage if you can cross the beams well. And that's one thing that's important to keep in mind. Hysteria is a incredible passive because it just gives you 20% more damage once you stack it on somebody. So that makes his pressure in lane actually pretty good because he can just keep hitting you for damage at range. He has a heal too, so if he hits his 3 and properly and can confirm his 2, there's not a whole lot you can do to him, especially since that will make him slow immune and give him bonus movement speed and he'll just walk away. I have yet to find a god that he doesn't work against in some way, just because keeping your distance and maximizing your Hysteria usage is going to do a lot for you. His clear is surprisingly good despite the type of mage he is. He's generally not known for his damage, but his wave clear can be pretty good. Because, 1-2, that will clear most things once you get later into the game. And then the ultimate. Oh, the ultimate. The versatility is very great on that. Because it's CC immune, he goes up in that. He can start pulling you. He can force relics. He doesn't even have to pull you all the way to be annoying with it. You can be really cheeky with it and spin around to maximize the pull and the damage. And the use of just keeping someone in one spot, even without pulling them all the way in. And then, of course, if you do, that's a big confirm for your 3 to hit all your other abilities. Really great for your teammates to play around. He's really good at just ulting around a corner at a team, forcing relics, forcing people to use movement abilities and all of that, so that your team can chase them down after the fact. See, his ult is good for everything else it does besides dealing damage and, locking somebody down. It is a big disruptor, and that has a lot of value, especially on big objectives like fire giants. And of course, a Baron's Brew, that's a broken thing. It's just pay less gold for a chalice for a thing, which isn't as good as either one individually, but it's cheaper. You can buy it at the beginning of the match, you know? So that's a big value, of course, for your entire team. Incredible character. King Arthur, do I put him in S+? I'll be cheeky. Maybe not. Obviously, the popularity of King Arthur has gone up quite a bit in 9.5 just because, things I'm talking about. He's a warrior that relies on his abilities a lot, and his clear is still very good because of that, especially if you've gone Bluestone. Of course. And of course, he's always got the lane pressure of I clear faster than everybody else. I can do a bunch of damage to you because I can press a ton of buttons. Gladshield has the biggest value on him out of any god in the game. He has several movement abilities that can make him hard to lock down. He's good at locking targets down because he has a cripple, a slow, a knock-up, and a stun, plus an ultimate with a banish. Do people think about that this god has, let me think, cripple, knock-up, slow, stun, banish. Yeah, he's got 5 crowd controls. People kind of forget that, I think, and don't realize that he has massive value just in that regard. Generally, he's not losing the lane. Spots where he can be in trouble are against mobile junglers that he can't really stop from chasing him. Granted, like his knock-up is good, his slow is good. Those really aren't going to stop someone from chasing him. His ult is his blue ult's very difficult to 180, so you're not going to really stop anyone that way. That's where he gets into trouble, is if he's ganked or if he's grouped into too many enemies. There's not really a great way for him to get distance clear quickly to avoid, because it's either short range stuff that's not going to stop like an assassin from chasing you, or it's just stuff that makes it easier for you to juke but isn't necessarily making you that much faster, like his 3. So that's his only problem, is if he gets ganked, if he gets caught out in a team fight. Although his team fight initiation, remember, is very good. He can blink in, use his ult on somebody right away and bring them up, get their beads. Team can come in. He can keep pushing the zone forward, continuing the pressure. Very good. He's, of course, kind of a high ceiling god in terms of how you position around fights with him, because he doesn't have some of that additional safety of I have an ability that lets me just jump out and leave. So he has to be careful where he is at all times. But of course, he's also meathead god with a bunch of abilities. Let me slap you in the face a bunch of times, and that's in itself some type of value. Yorm dead, not in the meta. Horus, I'm not really talking about him right now, because a bunch of items he likes got nerfed. We're going to ignore that. So that's going to go up here in the S category. Solid character. Again, very high skill ceiling god. So that's important to keep in mind to be effective. But if you know how to play the god, extremely effective. His clear is pretty safe. He can get a lot of pressure. He can be cheeky with how he groups minions with his 3. Or he can teleport in for quick poke and stuff. Things like that. It's very good to have. He can quickly get around the map and get to buffs and steal them, or get out when he needs to with his 3. It's very versatile ability because it's damage and slow immunity. And, yeah. Actually, no, his ult is slow immune. Okay, rephrasing that. But yeah, mobility on his 3 is very good. Usually won't get caught out because of that. And then if you're in a good position, obviously you can ult somebody, hit them for a lot of damage, which also has healing on it. So it gives you a little bit of protection that way. If you're diving, you get some health back. And then you can drop clones, pop them off for big damage. So if he can keep chasing a target, he's very potent damage in that regard. He's a very good god at going to a carry and chasing them down, and he's not like a lot of other assassins where he'll get blown up if he goes for that. His ult can allow him to chase for a little bit longer. He uses Gladshield pretty well. He uses Blackthorn pretty well. He can just build general normal defense items and still be really effective. Passive offers good DPS. You know, he's a god that is hard to play, but is very good when he is played well. Alright, continuing on to Mulan here. Pretty standard warrior things. Has some built-in sustain, high damage for lane pressure and all that. Her clear is pretty good. Her CC is alright. If you hit your pull on a target, that's a very good ability to hit because it does damage, pulls your target back, and pulls you toward them to keep chasing. Ult has good versatility as an escape, and also an ability to lock enemies down. Not as good as some other ultimates are going to be at that, but it has damage on it, which can make up for that a little bit. She's pretty annoying. She can chase you pretty well, especially once her 2 is, upgraded from its passive. It gives her some healing, which is very effective. Though she has the Kukulin problem, which is once I've run at you and used my kit, I will probably die. And even outside of that, if she misses her 3 at an important time, it's going to be pretty tough for her to run away from anybody. And her ult is a good escape, especially now since you can cancel it. But there's still a little bit of lag time with canceling it after it's over. And depending on what you're fighting, that may not be nearly enough distance either to get you out of trouble. So she's that god that's like, my kid is down, I guess I'll die then, type of thing. You can, of course, get cooldown to mitigate that, but not really liking her that much right now, if I'm honest. Cthulhu has kind of disappeared. This is sad. I have to put him down here, though, I think. He used to be pretty threatening. I mean, even with his passive, that can be good right now, but his ability to pressure lane is very bad, going to be pretty bad now. Because his 2 takes a little bit to cast. His 1 is good damage, but it's not as much as a lot of other gods. His ult is taken quite a tumble, I think, because it's just not a damage threat as much now. It's more of, I need more mitigation, and to keep myself out of trouble, I'm going to ult, or I'm going to ult for pressure. But a lot of his effectiveness got lost in 9.5 just because his damage is not effective. Stone of Binding was nerfed. Jade Imp was nerfed, which are items that he likes to build very often. Obviously, Hunters have always been kind of a struggle for him late game because they will still do a lot of damage even while he's ulted, and that also just makes him a massive target to get killed with. So having 2 Hunters on the map most of the time is going to be pretty bad for him. Alright, we're getting close to the bottom, everybody. Tsukuyomi pretty much not played in solo right now, so I'm not really going to spend any time on that. Gilgamesh has not been a viable solo option at high level in quite some time. Still viability is support in jungle, but in solo, he's so seldom seen that we're not really going to talk about it. Also, from the fact that he's kind of bad, Actually, honestly, yeah, we'll throw him down here. Why not? We don't have that many gods down here that get played with any frequency in solo. Not that he's getting played in solo right now, but he exists as an option. So we will talk about it briefly. He's very bad. His clear sucks early. Especially now, it's a lot worse against minions because he's pressing his 1 once, which early is not much damage, and then you're autoing, which exclusively, which is, again, bad if that's all you can do. And unlike a lot of the other gods we've talked about, the auto attack, he has no cleave, so he can't hit multiple minions at once, ever. Most warriors will just bully him to death. He will be under his tower the whole game, pretty much. And later is the only time you can do anything because then your ult becomes just a useful form of crowd control. And even at that point, you will probably be so far behind, you won't be doing anything. So there's not really a whole lot to discuss there. Horus, we will talk about, I guess now. I thought about it, but I guess we'll go ahead and do it. He was starting to see a little bit of viability in solo. Some of that has gotten incredibly nerfed because all of the items he likes got nerfed in the context of him playing solo. Again, his 1 is very good. His 1-2 combo, that's a lot of damage early and can be pretty difficult to deal with. Especially if you're not on a god that can really deal with that kind of thing very well. If you're on who would be a good example there? I guess Erlang is a good example. It's going to be pretty tough because you won't return a lot of damage to him early, and he will just keep spamming that crap on you and doing a third of your health every time. But because his top end damage has been nerfed because his items just aren't as good now, you're not going to see him really anymore. They're mostly because he can't be that big threat against a carry that he used to be, where he could chunk them for half their health. Especially now that there's 2 hunters most of the time. It's going to be tough for him just to lock 1 down and be a threat to it, let alone dealing with 2 at once. Alright, Kleena, we like our Kleena around here, God is very good in solo, very high damage, uses Soul Eater very well, which is important on these burst assassins, as we've discussed, and certain other solo laners. She can be very cheeky with how she uses her passive and walls. Surprise gank you. She can get good pressure on enemy buffs. And good to have. Her wave pressure can be a little bit awkward just because of the range of her 1. Doesn't allow her to hit the whole wave, but she's really not that interested in that because she can poke someone for quite a bit of damage, and that can be a big enough threat in itself, and that gives you the space to get the wave clear. Obviously, once you've gotten to level 3, at least, that becomes that is not how am I trying to say this? That is no longer a big factor with her having a slightly inefficient clear, because by then she's got enough damage and abilities to make up for that. And her threat to solo kill a god is very high, especially if her ultimate is used well. You get in close to somebody, start hitting them, throw those ults down for damage, and I think it's got a slow. I'm not entirely certain. I don't remember for sure. And then it's just big damage. Her in-hand damage with her autos is very high. Obviously, that transitions to late game where she's still a very high damage threat and is going to be able to solo a lot of gods, even if they're tanky, and even if she doesn't have a lot of tankiness herself. Soul Eater can make up for a lot of that and just raw damage output is good pressure. She's very good against solo hunters because it's very hard for them to deal with her damage. Gods like Chernobog, who I have fought in solo with her before, kind of just get roasted. Guy had no chance. I just did so much raw damage that he couldn't hardly walk up in the lane. But yeah, that's her thing. High raw damage gives her a lot of pressure. She can invade your buffs without much trouble, especially while using her passive well. Ult is very good as a team fighting tool and a single fighting tool if you can aim it properly. Her late game is not hampered by her being an assassin and not tanky. It's still a high damage threat. Very good things. Shiva, I think, is down here in the mid tier with a lot of the other warriors that are just not evidently really good at something. You know, he came in pretty hot because people thought his damage was pretty high, and it can be very high, you know. But you know, he's fallen off a lot in 9.5. I think people have just gotten bored with him, so we're not seeing him nearly as often. Still does the same thing, can still get good wave pressure. He's very good against single targets because of the CCs on his 1 and 2. Those are very annoying to deal with. Can keep you in one spot longer than you want to be. 3 is a good chase, also gives him block stacks, good against current meta with a lot of hunters. Is in bonus protection, obviously dance mode, 6-minute CC immunity, different things you can do with healing and damage, can be very potent in the right positions. And all of that. Very good, still the same thing he does, late game can be hard to kill. Good sustain because of his 1, can be really annoying in fights for zone control because he can pop his ult and run at you and do a threatening amount of damage. Done well. Good target chase down. All of that. He's just a good, you know, zone extender type of solo laner late game. And those gods tend to do fairly well. A lot of other gods are just played more now or do things better than he does, so that's where it is. Alright, guys. I think that's probably going to do it for that Solo Lane tier list. Like and subscribe if you guys enjoyed that. Leave a comment down below you want. And as always, check the helpful links down in the description. I'll see you guys next time for some more Smite. Have a good one.